Welcome to the Hindu Daily.
It's good to be here. We have a very heavy stack of papers today, 7 different sources, ranging from global geopolitics to the chemistry of addiction.
And we are going to need to take our time with these because the implications here are massive. I want to start with the first editorial, The Sunset of Global Law and the Return of Might. This isn't just a commentary. It feels like an obituary for the world we grew up in.
It effectively is. To understand why this piece matters, we have to go back to 1945. San Francisco, the founding of the United Nations. You have Harry S. Truman giving a speech that essentially tries to program the operating system for the entire post-war world.
And the core of that operating system was law over power, right?
Exactly. Truman said something that, by today's standards, sounds almost naive. He said that sovereignty wasn't a privilege granted by the strong to the weak. It was a right. He literally said we must deny ourselves the license to do always as we please.
Just think about the psychology of that. The leader of the only nuclear-armed superpower in the world, standing there and saying, we need to build a cage for our own power.
Because he had seen what happens when the cage breaks. He'd just lived through the 1930s.
Right.
Precisely. The logic was, if we don't have rules that bind even the strongest, we inevitably slide back into chaos. But the editorial argues that for the last 80 years, we've been living in a bit of a bubble. We assumed that rule of law was permanent.
And now we're seeing the return of what might be the natural state of history. Might is right.
And the piece points a finger pretty directly at the modern era, specifically at the foreign policy of Donald Trump. There's an analogy in here that's just, well, it's terrifyingly practical.
The one about Italian drivers and red traffic lights.
It's a brilliant, if cynical, comparison. In a functioning system, you stop at a red light because it's the law. It's a binding commitment. You don't even think about it. But the Italian driver view, at least in this stereotype, is that the red light is just a suggestion. It's a tool.
You look left, you look right. If no one's coming, or if you're in a bigger car, you just go.
Right. And that is the shift. It's not just hypocrisy anymore. Hypocrisy is, breaking the law but pretending you didn't. This is just indifference. When the U.S. president signals that sovereignty is optional, the red light stops being a command. It just becomes a decoration.
So play this out for me. What happens when the biggest truck on the road decides red lights don't apply?
You get the broken windows effect, but on a global scale. If Washington decides Venezuela's sovereignty is an inconvenience, they set a precedent. Beijing looks at that and says, well, if they can ignore the rules in their backyard, why can't we ignore the rules about Taiwan?
And Moscow looks at Ukraine.
Moscow looks at Ukraine not as a sovereign state, but as a historical error they can correct with tanks. It creates a permission structure for aggression, and the source makes a chilling point about the fear of World War III.
How that fear acted as a stabilizer.
It put a cap on how far countries would push. But now that fear is receding. We aren't necessarily heading for one big Armageddon, but a proliferation of smaller, grinding, endless conflicts. Because the referee has left the building.
Or the referee is just another player now. Which brings us to the concept of the interregnum.
Gramsci's term. The old world is dying, and the new world struggles to be born. We are in that dangerous gap between orders, and we're seeing a retreat from multilateralism, the U.S. pulling out of UNESCO, the WHO, arms control.
And when the U.S. pulls out, it's not just an empty chair, is it?
No, that's the mistake people make. Power abhors a vacuum. When the U.S. steps back, China steps in. They start staffing the committees. They start writing the definitions. They shape the norms to fit their priorities.
And this is happening right when we have what Kofi Annan called problems without passports.
Exactly. Pandemics, climate change, cyber threats. We have global problems that require global cooperation. At the exact moment, the mechanism for cooperation is being dismantled. The takeaway is that power is taming law, reversing the promise of 1945.
Which is a perfect, if depressing, transition to our next story. We're moving from the chaos of international skies to the chaos of Indian skies. We have an editorial titled, Chart the Course for Indian Aviation Data Transparency.
This is a classic example of how a lack of data allows bad behavior to flourish, just a lot closer to home.
It all kicks off with the Indigo crisis in December 2025. They had operational issues, flights get canceled, and suddenly fares just went vertical.
Right. And the regulators, the DGCA and the Competition Commission, did what regulators always do in India. They reacted. They sent out a notice asking for data from a 2-week period to see if there was abuse of dominance.
But the editorial says this is totally the wrong way to handle it. It's like investigating a crime scene after it's been rained on for 3 weeks.
Precisely. It's reactive. India is the third largest aviation market in the world. You cannot regulate a market of that speed and complexity by asking for spreadsheets, only when people start screaming on Twitter.
So the editorial points to the U.S. model.
Yes. The Bureau of Transportation Statistics, and specifically the DB1B database. It's fascinating how it works. In the U.S., the government requires airlines to submit a 10% random sample of all tickets sold, every single route.
They know the price, the carrier, everything.
Everything. And they publish it. It's a public utility. The editorial compares it to a speed camera.
Explain that analogy.
Well, think about driving. If you see a police car, you slow down. If you know there are speed cameras on the highway, you drive within the limit. Not because you're a moral person, but because you know you will get caught.
So it creates a compliance effect.
Exactly. If Indigo knows that the regulator and the public and its competitors can see exactly how much they hiked prices on the Delhi-Mumbai route last Tuesday, they might just think twice.
It forces them to build what the source calls ethical guardrails into their algorithms.
Right now, dynamic pricing algorithms are black boxes. They just see high demand, low supply, and they jack up the price. They don't have a conscience. But if you shine a light on the output, the airline has to program the algorithm to say, okay, maximize profit, but don't go so high that we trigger an investigation.
I can just hear the airline executives now. This is our proprietary data, our trade secrets.
That's always the defense. It's the secret sauce. But the source argues that the 10% sample is the perfect compromise. It's statistically significant enough to show the trend, the price, but it's not enough to reverse engineer the algorithm, the how.
It reveals the outcome without the strategy.
Correct. And there's a specific phenomenon mentioned called the Southwest effect.
Oh, this is why the historical data is so important.
It's the gold standard. Because the U.S. has this data, economists could prove that whenever Southwest Airlines, a low-cost carrier, simply announced a new route, fares on that route dropped before Southwest even flew a single plane.
Just the threat of competition lowered prices.
Yes. But you can only prove that if you have the data. In India, we suspect monopolies are abusing their power. We suspect prices spike when a competitor exits a route. But without a continuous stream of data, we're just guessing. We are flying blind.
So the argument is, stop asking for data when things break. Build a pipeline so we can see the cracks forming in real time.
Transparency isn't just about punishment, it's about market hygiene.
From market hygiene to public health hygiene, and a massive failure of it. We're looking at an opinion piece. The hidden cost of India's Beedi tax disparity.
This was a difficult read. It exposes a policy that is ostensibly designed to help the poor, but is in fact killing them.
The numbers are just staggering. Cigarettes in India are taxed at 40% GST, Beedis are at 18%.
And that huge gap is justified by the poor man's protection myth. The political logic has always been, Beedis are a cottage industry smoked by the rural poor. If we tax them high, we hurt the smoker and the beady rollers who need the jobs.
But the source just completely dismantles that, doesn't it?
It shreds it. First, the health impact. There's a misconception that because beedies are natural or smaller, they're safer. The data says the opposite. Beedi smokers have a 2.87 times higher risk of asthma compared to non-smokers.
And for cigarette smokers.
It's 1.82 times, so beedies are significantly more toxic.
And then there's the usage pattern. I was surprised by this volume problem.
It completely flips the narrative. The data shows that 80% of beedi smokers consume more than 5 sticks a day. Only 30% of cigarette smokers smoke that heavily. So the beedi smoker is inhaling more smoke, more often, with less filtration.
And this is where that protection argument just falls apart. We aren't saving them money. We are setting them up for financial catastrophe.
That is the demographic trap. Beedi smoking is concentrated in the poorest 20% of the population. These are families with zero financial buffer. The source points out that cancer treatment costs 3 times more than other ailments.
Though the government saves the poor man a few rupees on the pack of beedies.
And then he loses his entire life savings, his land, and his family's future when he gets oral cancer.
It is effectively a subsidy for death.
That is exactly what it is. And the wealth gap data proves it. As household wealth rises, beedi consumption just drops off a cliff. From 15% in poor households to 2% in rich ones.
While cigarette use stays relatively steady, the rich can afford the cigarettes and the health care. The poor get the cheap beedies and the bankruptcy.
So our tax policy is actually making the health crisis worse.
Precisely. We're plugging one hole in the boat while drilling a bigger one right next to it.
Let's go deeper into the science of this. The next source, the price of addiction, zooms out to the broader tobacco fight.
This moves from the economics to the biology and the politics.
It starts with the mechanism of addiction. And I think we forget sometimes that this isn't just a bad habit. It's a chemical hijacking of the brain.
It is. The source breaks it down. Nicotine enters the body, binds to receptors in the brain, and triggers the dopaminergic reward system. It happens in seconds. The brain is literally rewired to need that hit. And the industry knows this. They engineer the product to maximize it.
Menthol is a key villain here. The source mentions how additives like menthol mask the harshness, which lets you inhale deeper, and they actually keep the nicotine in your body for longer. It is designed to trap you.
So the World Health Organization has a benchmark to fight this, the 75% rule.
Right. The WHO has studied this globally. To effectively deter young people from starting and to push current smokers to quit, taxes need to be at least 75% of the retail price.
And where is India?
We are failing. Even with the hikes in February 2026, which raised prices by 30%, the tax component is only about 53% of the retail price for cigarettes. And for Beedis, it's obviously much, much lower.
Why can't we get this right? Is it just incompetence?
The source argues it's industry interference. And this isn't just simple lobbying. They talk about an interference index. The tobacco industry actively manipulates delegations to global health talks. They infiltrate policy discussions. They have tried to derail the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control for years.
It's a coordinated effort to keep addiction affordable.
And there's a new angle the source brings up, the environmental cost. We usually focus on lungs, but what about the ground?
The butts.
Trillions of them. Cigarette filters are made of a plastic called cellulose acetate. They don't biodegrade, they photodegrade into microplastics. They leach heavy metals and chemicals into the soil and water.
So it's not just a health crisis, it's a pollution crisis.
It is. And the source suggests we need to take the lessons from tobacco control and apply them to other harmful industries, like alcohol and ultra-processed foods. The lesson is that soft regulation just doesn't work against industries that profit from addiction.
Speaking of regulations, let's pivot to a different kind of freedom, the freedom of speech. We have a text and context piece called The Bee Sting of Scorn.
This is a fascinating legal and cultural analysis of satire. It was triggered by a specific event, the government blocking a cartoon.
A 52-second video on The Wire depicting Prime Minister Modi. The government blocked it, citing, and get this, threat to national security and foreign relations.
Which forces you to ask, can a cartoon really threaten national security?
The source contrasts this modern hypersensitivity with the past. Pandit Nehru famously told the cartoonist Shankar, "Don't spare me, Shankar."
That showed a real confidence in the democratic process. The idea was that the leader is a servant of the people, and the people have a right to laugh at him. But the legal landscape has shifted drastically. The source details the IT amendment rules of 2026.
The 3-hour rule.
This is the critical change. Previously, social media platforms had 24 to 36 hours to respond to a takedown notice. Now they have 3 hours.
3 hours is nothing. That's not enough time to consult a lawyer, let alone review the content for context or nuance. It's impossible.
That is the feature, not the bug. It forces platforms to err on the side of censorship. If you don't take it down instantly, you lose your safe harbor protection and become liable. And then there's a Sayoga portal, which automates these notices.
It turns censorship into an assembly line.
Exactly. But the courts have pushed back, haven't they? The source mentions a Madras High Court judgment that I found really poetic.
The Bee Sting of Scorn.
I love that phrasing. The court was looking at a defamation case involving a cartoon. And the judge ruled that a cartoon is meant to be offensive. It is meant to hurt. It is a weapon of attack. If a cartoon is polite, it's not a cartoon. It's a greeting card.
They even went back to George Washington being drawn as an ass.
Yes. The point is that ridicule is a safety valve. If you cannot laugh at power, that power becomes absolute. The Supreme Court in the Shreya Singhal case said that the originator of the content must be heard. You can't just silence people in the dark.
But with the 3-hour rule, the originator doesn't even know they've been silenced until it's already gone.
Exactly. We are moving from a system of notice and hearing to notice and takedown, and satire is the first casualty because it requires context. An algorithm or a panic moderator in a 3-hour window isn't going to understand irony. They're just going to hit delete.
Let's look at a time when people stood up to power, not with cartoons, but with their lives. We have another text and context piece, The Flower of Hope, the 1946 Naval Revolt.
February 18th is the 80th anniversary of this event, and the source makes a very deliberate choice to rebrand it. We grew up calling it the RNN Mutiny. They call it the Naval Uprising.
Words matter. Mutiny sounds like a crime. Uprising sounds like a revolution.
It does. And this wasn't just some sailors complaining about food, though that's how it started. At HMIS Talwar in Bombay, they were served terrible food and faced constant racial discrimination. But it just exploded into a massive political statement.
The scale was incredible. 20,000 sailors, 78 ships, 20 shore establishments.
But the image that defines this event for me, and the source highlights this, is the flags. Imagine these gray warships in Bombay Harbor. And on the masts, the sailors tied 3 flags together: the Congress tricolor, the Muslim League's green flag, and the Communist Party's red flag.
In 1946, that's incredible. The country was on the brink of partition. Civilians were killing each other in the streets over religion. But on those ships, they were united against the British.
And that unity spilled onto the streets. This is the part of the history I feel we've really forgotten: the fraternization. The working class of Bombay Hindus and Muslims came out to support the sailors.
The source describes people in the mill districts like Madhampura and Kamatapura building barricades together.
They dug up tram tracks, they threw stones at armored cars. It was a total breakdown of colonial authority. And the British response was just terrifying. They didn't use police, they used the military, they fired machine guns at stone throwers. Over 200 civilians were killed.
So why is this a footnote in our history? We celebrate the Salt March, we celebrate Quit India. Why not the Naval Uprising?
Because it didn't fit the narrative. The Congress leaders didn't like it because it was violent and they couldn't control it. The British obviously hated it. And then just a few months later, the horrors of partition began. The abyss of communal hatred just swallowed the memory of this unity.
The source ends with a quote from a Sahir Luthianvi poem.
A flower of hope amidst a garden scorched and desolate. It's a powerful reminder that even when political leadership is dividing us, the people on the ground, the sailors, the mill workers, are capable of incredible solidarity.
A flower of hope. I like that. For our final piece, we are going from the history of 1946 to the future of 2026 and beyond: Project Volt and the new doctrine of mineral sovereignty.
This brings us right back to geopolitics, but now it's about the dirt under our feet, or rather, the specific rare elements in that dirt.
So introduce us to Project Vault.
This is a new initiative by the Trump administration. It's a $10 billion public fund, $2 billion private. The goal is to build a strategic mineral reserve.
Like the strategic petroleum reserve we have for oil.
Same logic, different century. In the 1970s, the world realized it could be held hostage by oil. In the 2020s, we can be held hostage by cobalt, lithium, and rare earths.
And what triggered this realization?
The source points directly to 2025. China retaliated against U.S. tariffs by restricting the export of rare earth magnets, and it almost brought the entire U.S. auto industry to a halt. That was the wake-up call. Minerals are no longer just commodities you buy on the open market. They are strategic assets you must control.
And this ties into something called Pax Silica.
Yes, the Peace of Silicon. It's a coalition launched in December 2025. The U.S., Japan, UAE, UK, and India is invited. The goal is to secure the entire supply chain for artificial intelligence.
Because AI needs chips, chips need massive amounts of energy, and all of it needs minerals.
It's the new holy trinity of modern power: energy, minerals, and compute.
But there's a snag, isn't there? The source mentions friction, asymmetrical trade deals.
This is the America First problem again. The U.S. wants to build this fortress and wants its allies to help fill it. But the allies are nervous. They worry that the U.S. will use these reserves to protect American companies, but leave them out in the cold if things get tough.
So the allies have to hedge their bets.
Exactly. You can't put all your eggs in the American basket if the American president treats that basket like a bargaining chip. So while Project Vault is a smart move for U.S. security, it also highlights the profound lack of trust and predictability in the global system.
And we circle right back to where we started: a world where trust is eroding, rules are breaking down, and everyone is trying to grab what they can.
That really seems to be the theme of the day, whether it's nations grabbing minerals, airlines grabbing profits, or the state grabbing the right to censor cartoons. It's a scramble for control.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.